Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of People Before Politics. I'm Michelle Ferreri, Member of Parliament for Peterborough-Kawartha, and if you've been following along in this series, which I hope you have, maybe this is your first time. If it's not your first time and you've seen the other episodes or some of the other episodes, thank you so much for watching. But if it is your first time, I always like to give a little overview of what sort of prompted this series and why we do it. And I think in a world where we have forgotten how to have human and face-to-face conversations, we often forget that at the core of whoever somebody is in terms of their title, they're a person first. So in terms of elected officials, there's a person there. There's either a mom, a sister, a brother, a dad, an uncle. There's all these life experiences that have shaped who they are and ultimately shaped their political preference, their political ideology. And I think it's really important when we know who the person is, when we have more of a relationship and connection to the person, we're able to listen to them more at the core of what they have to offer. So that's kind of the premise behind People Before Politics. And we've had some incredible guests on the show, and today is no exception. Really excited to welcome Tracy Gray, everyone. The crowd goes wild. Whoa! Tracy is a Member of Parliament for Kelowna-Lake Country, first elected in October of 2019, re-elected in September of 2021, and currently serves as the Shadow Minister, or Critic as we like to call it, for Employment, Future Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion, and is also a member with me on the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities, or we call it HUMA. So Tracy, welcome.
Great, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So Tracy is one of these really critical people to me because you've been an incredible mentor. Tracy's kind of like the opposite to my personality in a lot of ways, where you know process, you're very detail oriented, you're very, like, you are so good at taking stuff and the facts, and you've been an incredible mentor for me, especially on HUMA and when we're looking at like Bill C-35, which is the child care bill. But before we get into all of that, you as a human, tell me a little bit about growing up. Did you grow up in Kelowna or did you grow up somewhere else?
Yeah, so I grew up in Lethbridge, Alberta. So that's where I grew up, and I was adopted.
That's Rachel Thomas's riding, is it?
It is,
yeah.
it is,
okay.
yes. I had a wonderful family. My dad was a fireman, my mom was a school teacher, and so I grew up with really strong values of work ethic and of service. And, you know, we did a lot of the things that, you know, at that time we would do in southern Alberta. So we skated, I figure skated, we swam, you know, in the summer, and we all learned to swim and would do crafts and things like that. We would go camping. So yeah, I had a wonderful family upbringing. My parents have both passed away now, and so I miss them dearly.
I bet. Yeah, you're young to not have both parents. That's really young. You said you were adopted there, and you've had a connection with your original birth family, which is really cool as well. It's a neat dynamic that I think a lot of people don't know, and a lot of people have that experience. Okay, so you obviously must have did really well in school because you're really smart. Like, she's going to be humble, but I'm telling you, you're able to take a lot of information, dissect it, and you're very like, you can attack it, whether, I don't know if you know this, but this is how I see you attack it very strategically, pragmatically, and systematically. And so have you always done really well in school?
I did I did well in school, but yeah, I sort of like, you know, I'll look at something, whether it's an issue or a problem, and then try and say, okay, well, really what does this mean? How can we piece it apart? You know, what's important? What are the important elements? What do we need to look at? And I think, you know, being a business owner, you know, I started my own business. I did some consulting work. I guess it's a matter of sort of piecing together, you know, what's the issue? What do we want to? What's the vision? What do we want to tackle? And yeah, I like it a lot, actually, getting, you know, a huge package and then sort of going through it and going, okay, what's really important here? Like
I said, we're different. She looks at all the information. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So yeah, I'm very impressed by that, because it's something that I don't do as well as you do. But when did you sort of take an active role? I mean, you've won some incredible accolades, actually, if I bring these up. You won RBC Let me see this because this was a big deal. So RBC Canadian Woman Entrepreneur of the Year, Kelowna Chamber of Commerce Business Excellent Award, and 100 New Woman Pioneers in BC. And this is all in the wine business?
Yeah, so I worked most of my career in the British Columbia beverage industry. So I worked for many wineries, microbreweries, and a lot of those positions were operations, marketing, working in the stores.
And you started?
Hospitality.
How did you start?
Well, I moved to Kelowna. I had literally just turned 19. I moved to Kelowna. I was actually following a boy that I met in Alberta, and he was from Kelowna. He was moving back to Kelowna, so I moved to Kelowna, and it worked out well because we've been married over 30 years. So it worked out well, and I started working almost immediately at a winery as a tour guide. And I remember being, so I started day one, and day two I had to do a tour of over 50 people. I knew literally nothing about wine. I was so stressed out. And so, I stayed up all night memorizing the tour package, thinking, I hope no one asks me a question because I don't know anything out of what's literally just written there. And the next day I did the tour, and that's sort of what started off my career. I ended up managing the wine shop, within a year, and then sort of advancing in my career. And then we moved to Vancouver. We lived in Vancouver for a few years in the mid-90s. That's actually where our son was born, was in Vancouver. And then we moved back to Kelowna. But I had an opportunity in British Columbia. Every province has different liquor licensing. And so in BC, we've got a real mix of government and private. And there are these really unique licenses called BC VQA wine store licenses. And at the time, there was only about 10 of them. And the BC government had said if they were successful and operating well, they were really started to bring exposure to the BC wine industry because it was really young and it was just starting out. This would have been the late 80s.
Okay.
And they said if they're doing well, then we'll allow more licenses to open. So I got on to that next wave of the second group of licenses. Mm-hmm. And it was quite an extensive process. We had to go through a full business plan, pick location, acquire financing, which was a really big challenge, and I got turned down everywhere.
Small businesses here, where you just make the economy work, but we're not going to give you any money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I eventually ended up getting financing through the Women's Enterprise Center.
Cool.
In British Columbia, which gets funding through Western Diversification. It was a higher interest loan, but it allowed me to start my business. And so anyways, I opened up a wine store in Kelowna. It was called Discover Wines. And it was really interesting because when we first opened, it was literally a month before the 2003 Okanagan Mountain Park fires. And those were the fires that some people might remember came through the Okanagan, and a third of the city of Kelowna was evacuated. Every tourist, of course, left. I was evacuated out of the home that we were in at the time. We had no sales because I had just opened. We were about to have our grand opening, which we had to cancel. There was almost 300 homes that had burnt, and so it was a real crisis situation in our community. And so here I am, just opened, literally, had hardly any sales. Credit cards maxed out, everything maxed out, couldn't really hire staff. So I was working 7 days a week. We had a young son at the time, and thinking, I'm going to lose everything. And because all of a sudden you're completely in debt, and we couldn't really start. And so that's why actually, moving forward to the time of the pandemic, when businesses were closed and they were calling saying, I think I'm going to lose everything, I could actually feel it in the pit of my stomach, because I had, on a different way, been in a similar situation, although mine was much more short-lived. It wasn't years like what a lot of small businesses have had to deal with now, but thinking, everything's maxed out, what am I going to do?
Wow. And I just want to say, if anyone can hear the drilling, there is construction going on around us, in case you thought it was something else. I'm just saying. So how did you get out of that? How did you survive that?
Just bootstraps. I mean, I didn't take a wage. I had another business partner at the time, another woman business partner at the time, who ended up buying out, years later. But we basically just worked and just kind of held off held off the debtors for a few months until we could get some sales. But within the first year of opening, we were the #1 store in the province. Really
Congratulations.
proudly, and held that for 13 years.
Wow, that's a great story, actually, and it gives you that experience to truly understand the real struggles of small business, which I know you're so passionate about. Two things you touched on that I want to talk about. So I want to go back to when sort of you became involved in politics, but I also want to talk about your husband, Larry. He's a wonderful human, and he's up here a lot with you. And he was great. He was great with me, helping me with my toe. Do you remember that when he helped me? I talked about that with Dr. Ellis, but he's
There's
he's
a bit
one.
of an injury that, and my husband was a former ski patroller, so he, in sure no danger, he was able to,
He was
to be
awesome.
there and,
He was
and
great.
help. Yeah.
And your son is wonderful too. He's you're a really
he's
proud
doing
mom.
really well.
Yeah, you're a proud mom. But when did you sort of say, "Hey, I actually care about politics," or do you feel like you were always a conservative, or do you feel like you were fluid in your political beliefs?
Well, I think, going back to my parents, it was, very much about, about doing what's right, standing up for what you believe. And I, I wasn't really involved in politics. I was, raising a family, having my business.
Trying to keep your business afloat.
But we were kind of in the peripheral, and in particular, my husband was quite involved, both municipally and provincially and federally. So I was kind of always in the peripheral. But I think what really started piquing my interest was leading up to the 2014 municipal election in Kelowna. So I was out in the community a lot. By that point, I'd had my business around 10 years. I had a really good team. We really had our systems in place, and I was out in the community, being involved with different organizations, volunteering. Our son was older, then he was a teenager, and I was looking at who was running for municipal council at the time, and thought, there's really hardly any small business owners, and most of the businesses where I'm from in Kelowna, and now Kelowna-Lake country for my electoral district riding, are small businesses, farmers, small businesses, and I thought, I want to be a representative of small businesses on city council. And so, because a lot of decisions really do affect, the businesses in an area. So that's why I ran, and I was successful. And I really used that lens a lot when we were looking at different bylaws and as things were happening in the city. Mm-hmm.
I think that's really helpful, right? I've had this conversation with a few other guests, but it's like a lot of people still don't really know the different levels of government, right? Like I'm sure your constituency office gets this all the time. You get phone calls and it's really a provincial issue or it's a municipal issue. But they do kind of collide often. But having that municipal experience would be so beneficial to bring to the table, even in the procedure and process. But when were you like, conservative is where I land? Because municipal is typically nonpartisan. It's supposed to be.
I think during my time of working working in the beverage industry and then owning my own business, understanding fiscal responsibility, understanding budgeting, seeing how government policy can affect your business, positive or negative. And so really then actually living it, and seeing, okay, when this policy or this taxation, or this procedure, how does this actually affect business? And so it's really that sort of fiscal lens, I think, which was what drew me, this way. I've always leaned this way, where people should take personal accountability,
Personal responsibility.
If you work hard, you should be able to get ahead. Personal freedoms. Those are some cores that I've had my whole life. Yeah.
Leave me be to succeed or fail on my own, right? I think is kind of the undercurrent. And especially when you look at businesses in your story, going back to your story where you did it on your own, right? Like you were able to get yourself out of that, like, you maxed out your credit cards. You used your own funds to leverage yourself, right? So I think that's really interesting that you did all that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the lens that I use, is that, and it is taking risk. Not 100%. That was not everyone wants to take risks, and so again, if you take risks, you should be able to get ahead if you take certain risks. But it is really risky, and even just in running a business, I see that. I'll just give you maybe one really quick example. We, as I mentioned, we were the #1 store for 13 years, and there was a lot of different strategies that we did, but it was very grassroots. You know, it wasn't, you know, massive sales campaigns. It was one-on-one sales. It was relationship building.
Yes.
You know, and that's very much in our role as well. You know,
Yeah.
being an elected official, I see it as very service orientated. But for example, we would do something like we would ask wineries, excuse me, we would ask wineries what wines they were sending to different competitions. And they would give us the list, and we would taste through them because we had a tasting counter very similar to a winery. And we had, you know, between our collective groups, a good palate. You know, we could kind of assess what wines were really good. And so we would say, this is going to win something quite substantial. So we would start ordering it quietly. You know, case here, case there. And it hasn't, you know, received any recognition, but a couple months later when it wins a double platinum,
All of a sudden
we've got inventory. You know, and though that's a risk because you're kind of hedging that it's going to win something substantial. But even if it didn't, you know, we could have put it in a really nice Christmas gift pack or something like that.
Cool.
But it's you know, it's taking that leap of faith
and vision. That's vision is what that is, really. Kelowna is such a beautiful part of Canada. Like, it's one of the most beautiful spots. So what an honor to be able to represent that riding.
I would agree with that. Yes.
But one of the things people don't know or don't think about, I guess, is the traveling for an MP. So we basically have two full-time jobs, right? You have to represent your constituency, your riding, your community, and you have an office there to help with government services. And then you have to come to Ottawa and work in the House. And for me, I get to get in my car and drive 3 hours east down Highway 7. And yeah, it's sometimes annoying in the winter and there's transports and this and that. But you are not only in a different time change, you have to get on a plane every week and you have to come back and forth. Like, that is a big piece of the puzzle a lot of people don't know about MPs. How do you adjust to that travel and the time change?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I knew what the role was going into it, and I wanted to be at a certain place in life before I, you know, went down this path. So I knew that, you know, I was going to be away a lot.
Yeah.
But especially now, you know, travel is a lot more difficult, especially to Western provinces, because the airlines have really, there's not as many flights. You know, it used to be lots of flights on a Friday that could get you back to British Columbia, and there's literally one now, you know, that I can go on. So, and there's no direct flights. So
I was just going to say that you don't fly direct to Kelowna.
There's no direct flights. So I either have to go through Toronto or Montreal or Calgary or Vancouver or all of the above, depending on what the situation is.
Yeah.
So lots of sleeping in airports. Of course, I just, you know, I've got my little, you know, Surface, my little laptop there, and I just, you know, I just work and kind of head down work. But it just takes time away from the community.
It does, and it's I just find on your body the time change, like that's a lot. That's a lot for your body to adjust to. I just think about the BC caucus a lot, and I mean every caucus, but the BCs just seems sort of the farthest, and then up north too, right?
Yeah.
That's a big one.
And you know how you were saying just with the job, it's, you know, I was actually speaking with a UBCO class very recently during a constituency week and it was a political science class on sort of the role of an MP and kind of breaking it all out, and, you know, kind of explaining that you actually have two very different, they're integrated, but two very different roles in a way, because you've got all of the work at the constituency office, which is dealing with case files and immigration and people coming with CRA issues, and, you know, and then outreach and events. And then here in Ottawa, it's all of the parliamentary duties. So it's actually, you know, two very different roles, but there is a lot of integration.
And managing staff.
Managing staff and hiring staff. There's, you know, you do have the House of Commons services in different ways, but it is very much like running your own. You know, we all see that, right? You've got to hire your own team. You have to come up with your own procedures. How are you going to do everything from sorting emails to how you're going to respond to people to, you know, all of that you have to, you know, figure out on your own.
Yeah.
So
that's why mentors and team, and Tracy's always, she's like, we're a team. This is what we're doing. We're a team. And that's why it's so valuable for these incoming MPs to rely on the more seasoned, experienced MPs to kind of help us. And you have to be a team. Like the peer support here is really, really important. Okay, what do you love most about this job? And what have you done in your time here that you're most proud of?
Oh, well, I think it's you know, being home in the constituency and listening to people, and then hearing what issues are and figuring out how to what to do about it. You know, how can I
Problem
either
solving.
advocate, it's problem solving. So is this something that I can bring to committee? Maybe we can do a study. Is this something that we can look into and do some research on and get back to people? Is this something that we need to write out, because we're in the official opposition, of course, that we can write to a minister on? Is this something that's a greater policy idea? So it's sort of taking those different issues forth and then, you know, figuring out where it falls. And then also just being the voice. I mean, you know, in a lot of the speeches that I do, you know, I'll quote residents of mine. I know that you do this a lot as well. It's really great. You know, people know, well, my voice is being I look at myself as being their voice. You know, and really what you know, I'm hearing a lot about the big issues and you know, maybe yours are the same as well, but is inflation. People can't afford to live. You know, when you look at the interest rates, now people's mortgages are being renewed. They're having a really tough time. Food bank usage is up. Crime, you know, mental health, addiction, you know, those are some of the real big items that are affecting everybody's day-to-day life that I'm hearing about a lot. And it's, you know, bringing that voice forth, doing the surveys in the community. You know, I have mailers that go out every month. You know, they've always got surveys on them, and it's amazing how many people reply to them.
It's amazing. People want to be heard.
Hundreds and
right?
hundreds and hundreds,
Agreed.
Yeah.
You did a private members bill that sadly didn't pass. I don't understand that at all, but it's really, it was a really brilliant private members bill. Do you want to tell people what it was?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, you know, I always thought if I ever got into this role and I ever had the opportunity to do a private members bill, I would want to do something mental health and addiction related, but I didn't know what. You know, and so over the course of a couple of years, my team and I, we went down a lot of rabbit holes and came across a lot of barriers where, oh, that's provincial. And so it was actually Rob Morrison, one of our Conservative colleagues, that was working on this private members bill, and we, but his number was really high, which means he wasn't able to really bring it forth in this Parliament.
I should explain that. So private members bill is basically you as a member of Parliament draw a number. It's like a lottery, and you're one of 338, and you get to put forth a bill in the House, something you create, like it's your own private members bill, exactly how it sounds. So if you're like number 280, like the chances of you getting drawn is pretty low. So sometimes people will give it to you because they don't have something ready, because you have to draft it, you have to work. It's like a lot of legal work to do this. So just some context to that.
That's great to explain that. And so we took it and did a lot more research and did a lot more work on it. And so my private members bill was called End the Revolving Door Act. And it was to get mental health and addiction treatment and recovery in federal penitentiaries. So it's within federal jurisdiction.
Brilliant.
We know that more than 70% of people that are incarcerated to federal penitentiaries have addiction issues, and we know that recidivism is very high. So it truly is a revolving door. So this would have been to help those people. To help them, also help the families and the communities that they go back into. And unfortunately, it did not pass in order to send it to even committee to be studied.
Were you given a reason why? I mean, obviously, Conservatives voted in favor of it.
Yes, and the Blocs voted as well. But in debate in the House of Commons, the NDP were saying that it wasn't, you know, it didn't include harm reduction, which it didn't. That's a whole completely separate issue. And the Liberals had talked a bit about, you know, that there should be prevention, which is true. There should be prevention. Also, that marginalized people are more incarcerated, which is true, but you would think that this would actually then help them. So I don't really understand the rationale for those that would vote against it. I know that we had support right across the country, national organizations, those that work in criminal justice, and all kinds of different organizations were supporting it. So that's really unfortunate, because there's a lot of people that would have been helped by it.
It was a really great bill. I was a big fan of it. And anything, you know, when we're looking at sort of the treatment end of things, right? Like so often we look at it in a three-tier, like prevention, intervention, but then the maintenance, treatment, and recovery, which is a lifelong process for so many people. And I think you were really, you were touching on prevention because you want to help people. So it was a shame. It was a shame that it didn't happen, but hopefully we'll we'll see something maybe come out when we're government, and we'll put it in our
Absolutely.
policy. How's that sound in our platform? One thing you don't like about this job. What don't you like about this job?
Oh, wow. Well, I think you touched a little bit on the travel part. I think sometimes too when you're dealing with online, there can be a lot of.
What do you mean, Tracy? Everybody's
lot
so
of-
nice.
But lots of
Name
times
me
it's
three
not.
things I got named this week. It's great.
Lots of times it may not necessarily be people that live in
No.
your riding, or you don't even know if they're real people because their profiles aren't
Yeah.
like they're not real profiles. So, but I just try and just go above all of that and just keep my head focused on what I'm doing and who I'm serving and why I'm here and connecting with the community. So
It's great.
I don't spend that much time looking at
neither.
all of that. Yeah.
Biggest goal, what would you love to see yourself achieve before you exit as an MP?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I don't know if I can answer that, to be
You
honest
don't
with you.
have to.
I approach this every day as like just work as hard as I can,
Yeah.
serve as good as I can, be a team player in every way that I can. And that's the approach that I have. And however long I'm in this role, I'll just give it my all.
Yeah.
And
You do.
wherever it leads, it leaves. I don't, have necessarily this aspiration or that. I think it's just, just do as good as I can in the role, like genuinely, and just work really, really hard and yeah, be part of a team, help out people, and
I love
mentor
that.
when I can mentor. But I also have a lot of mentors that I look up to as well here. As absolutely, whether it's here or outside of this place.
I think that's actually a really great answer because it kind of comes back to what you said in your wine industry and relationships. It's like, yeah, like we have pie in the sky things, like I think about mental health all the time and children's mental health and stuff. But when you break it down to that, like step by step, like if you show up every day, if you remember that you're here to serve every day, it's like this accumulation of a better place, leaving a better place than when you found it, right? Like, so I think that's actually a really great goal. Okay, fun little facts. You were in a band. You sing.
Oh.
This is hilarious. So, what's your favorite song? Favorite type of music?
Well, okay. So, I mean, so at home we listen to a little bit of everything. We're a little bit of 80s rock at our place, but honestly, a little bit of everything. But the band that I was in was called the Political Posse. We were 3 levels of government working together. Because at the time I was on municipal council, so I was one of 3 city councillors. We also had our local a local MLA and a local MP.
MLAs are MPPs for people outside of
Okay,
Ontario.
yeah,
In
provincial.
Ontario, we call them MPPs.
So between all 3 of us, we were the band that would come in between the real bands. So at community events,
Right.
So there would be out. We were out almost every weekend, and so we would do more sing-along songs. Things that like Neil Diamond and Beatles
love
and
it.
things like that everybody knows the song and people can kind of do it
Bum,
along
bum,
to.
bum.
Exactly.
I love
so
it. That's
yeah,
great.
we had a lot of fun with it. It was really just about community outreach and volunteering and connecting, and we did it for a couple of years. It was really
great.
fun.
These were the fun questions when I asked like Michael Cooper, like, what was your favorite food? And he was like, oh, I can't answer that, Michelle. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. Actually, I think he answered the favorite food one, but when I asked him like his favorite movie or book or something, he was like, I don't know. I said, okay, never mind. I'll just keep it political, Michael. It was so funny. I want to thank you very much for your time today, Tracy Gray. You bring so much wealth and of knowledge and team spirit. And I really look forward to serving in government with you. So that would be your cue, everyone, to get involved. If you're digging what we're putting down here and you're picking up what we're putting down and think, maybe I'm more political than I thought, right? Like, I think that's sometimes challenging what you think you knew. Because I think it's like you're fluid, maybe what you thought when you were 20 is different than what you know at 30 or 40. And, we welcome everyone to join us and to get involved and to serve their community and make Canada a better place to live. So.
And you're a great addition to the team, Michelle. And Michelle, for those that are listening, is a great representative of her community. She really stands up for her community. So you've got a great representative here.
Thank you very much. Tracy Gray, where can people follow you on social media and find out more about you?
Oh, I'm on all the platforms, so yeah, you should be able to
It's
find
Tracy without an E.
TracyGray.
And it's Gray, Gray, not the other one. I'm not even going to tell you what it is, right? Because now you know. Tracy Gray, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of People Before Politics. week.